Uh, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our online session. Yes, today's lecture. So, in today's lecture, today is a very special. Today's lecture will be very special because this is the final block of this course. That is ENM 6213 Literary Theory and Policy. That is block 4, Postmodern Criticism. Before we begin that with today's content, today's topic, I mean, I want to take a moment to appreciate how far we have come. Like we have started in this second semester, we have started with if you remember, we have started from classicism, classical theory, classical criticism, and from classical criticism, that is we came to new classical criticism, and from there we move on to modern criticism, and now in today's lecture we are reaching the most contemporary section of this course, like part of the section of this course, that is uh, postmodern criticism. Okay, so what is postmodern criticism? It is very exciting because it challenges everything we thought we knew about language, meaning, power, and the role of gender in literature. It asks us not just to read a text, but to question who wrote it, what systems of power shaped it, and what meanings are hidden beneath the surface. So today we shall cover all this, all the 5 minutes. Okay, there are 5 minutes in this flow. I will come to that in breakdown. Right now, before that, let me quickly take you back to previous lecture. That is on block three, modern criticism. And before that, this will be the lecture contents of today. In today's lecture contents of today. So first, a review of literature, and then unit breakdown from unit 16 to 20, block 4, and then learning goals. There is objectives and outcomes, and then we shall discuss, and then have and give you some questions, and then finally we shall conclude the discussion. Right, now let's move on. So now in the previous lecture, we have discussed the major ideas and methods that shaped what uh, literary criticism in the 20th century, right? And we have also learned that modern criticism moved away from biographical and historical approach of earlier centuries and turned into attention really to the text itself, right? One of the most important principle of modern. I mean, if you know, like one of the most um, important principles of modern criticism was uh, the idea that literary works should be understood and evaluated on its own terms, not based on the life of the author or the historical period, but through a careful and objective analysis of the text. We have also discussed the relationship between tradition and individual creativity, right? And which was famously developed by T.S. Eliot, um, and also argued that a new literary work is always in conversation with the great works of the past. And a writer does not work in isolation, or should write within a tradition. And the best writing both you know inherit, not only inherit, and also uh, 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 refreshes the tradition. And another key contribution of modern criticism was the method of practical criticism and a close reading. So this approach is developed by critics like I.R. Richards, and later the new critics encouraged readers to look very carefully at the language, imagery, structure, and the tone of the text. So the goal was not was to understand exactly how the piece of writing creates its meaning and emotional effect. All right. So this is all about previous lecture. So now let's move on to the unit breakdown of block four. There is of block four of literary theory and wisdom. So now, in the first unit, there is a 16. Unit 16, we have it deals with Ferdinand de Saussure, that is signifier, sorry, science signifier, signifier. And unit 7 deals with Ferdinand de Saussure's categories of sign, icon, indexed, or symbol, and so on. And unit 18 deals with, Michel Foucault, power and culture. And unit 19 deals with, Eleni, Sowalt, feminist poetics, right? And again, unit 20 deals with, again, the same similar writer, that is Eleni, Sowalt, that is gender criticism, criticism, right? So these are the things we shall be discussing today. Now let's move on to the learning goals. So the first, there are objectives and outcomes here. So what are the objectives and outcomes? So to first is to understand the concept of what sign and meaning in language, and the second is to examine the different types of sign and their functions, and third is to analyze the role of power in shaping culture and discourses, and the fourth one is to explore feminist approaches to literary criticism. And what about the outcomes? The first outcome is, assistant, you'll be able to explain the sources theory of language. And second, you'll also able to identify types of signs with examples. And third is to evaluate text using power and discourse theory. And fourth is to you'll be able to apply feminist and critical approaches in analysis. So these are the objectives and outcomes of of this block, of this discussion. Okay, now we shall move to the unit 16. So this unit 16 deals with the foundational, ideas of fundamental resources on language. So, Saussure was a Swiss linguist, okay, whose work, in the late 19th century, I mean, late and 19th and 20th century, completely, transformed the way we think about language. So Saussure's central argument in this is that language is not collection of words that refer to the objects, you know, in the world, right? Instead, language is a system of what? Sign. This is a very important shift in thinking. Before Chaucer, most people assumed that words were like labels. You had an object, and the word was the name you gave it. And the word was the name you gave it, something like that. So Chaucer said, no, language is much more complex and much more interesting than that. So according to Chaucer, every sign that is like in every unit of language is made of two inseparable parts. The first part is the signifier, that is the signifier, which is the form and the sound. I mean, like the signifier is is the form and the sound, the written word and the image. Okay, when you see or hear the word tree, okay, so the second part is the signify. The signified is the concept or the mental image that the signifier, sorry, fire calls up in your mind. So the idea of a tree, with the branches and leaves and roots. So now here is the most important and often surprising point. How the relationship between the signifier and the signifier is arbitrary. So this means that there is no natural or logical connection between the word and the concept. Why do we call a tree a tree? Is there a reason? Any idea? Why do we call that? Oh, there is no reason rooted in nature, right? In like for example, in In Hindi, we pet. Pet is three, right? Uh, and in France, arbre or something like. I'm not so sorry for the pronunciation. And in Bengali, it is gach, right? In Gogoro, it is bupang. In Bolsom, in my language, it is thinkung, something like. So the object is the same, but the signifiers are completely different. This proves that the connection is based on social convention, not on any natural bond. So this also means that uh, meaning in language is created by difference, by how one sign is different from other sign. So not by any fixed connection to reality. For example, cat because uh, means something because it is differently from bat, hat, and bat. So understanding this principle is like fundamental to all postmodern literary criticism. So now, uh, let's move on to the next unit. That is unit 17. That is categories of sign like icon, index, and symbol. So like so here we shall look into the main three categories, right? These are icon, index, and symbol. So these categories were like further like developed by who? Like American philosopher like Charles Sanders Peirce. Okay, building on like these are like building on social foundation, and they are extremely useful tools for literary and cultural analysis. That's as you can see, the first category is the icon. So an icon sign is the one that resembles or looks like what it represents. So the relationship between a signifier and signified here is based on similarity or likeness. A photograph of a mountain is an iconic sign. It looks like the mountain. A drawing of a person is iconic because it resembles a human being. So in literature, descriptive language that paints a vivid picture in your mind is working iconically. Okay. So the second category is the index. Index. An indexical sign has a direct or like a real world connection to what it represents. It points to something or indicates something. The way smoke indicates fire. Smoke does not look like fire, but where there is smoke, we know there is fire. So other examples include like footprints on the beach. They index the presence of a person. A medical symptom like your fever indexes illness. In literature, certain uh, certain details can function as indexes. So they point us toward a deeper meaning or a hidden cause. And now the third category is the symbol. A symbolic sign is based on what? It is entirely on convention or social agreement. There is no natural resemblance or physical connection involved. So the relationship is purely arbitrary and agreed upon by the community. Language itself, as social, showed us in symbolic national flags, are as symbolic. There is nothing naturally Indian about the tricolor. It is it is meaningful because we, as a society, have agreed that it represents India. That tricolor represents India. That's why it becomes meaningful. Otherwise, it doesn't have any naturally the connection, right? That's why it is national flags are symbolic. Okay, so understanding these three categories help us as literary critics, help us as literary critics, as to ask a research set of questions about what a text. How does this text create meaning through resemblance? What does it point to or it depth? And what symbols does it rely on? And where do those symbols come from? So this is all about unit 17. like categories of sign, that is icon, index, and symbols. So now we move on to the unit 18. Okay. So now here we can see there is power and culture. So this is like this unit introduces us to one of the most influential thinkers of like what do you say like of the 20th century. The one is like I have not mentioned here actually. The French philosopher and historian, that is Michel Foucault, and I mean the French philosopher and historian Michel Foucault, and he was actually like introduces. He was introduces actually, the idea, right? So Michel Foucault ideas, what about the relationship between power, culture, knowledge, and culture have had a profound impact not only on literaturism but on sociology, history, political science, and many other academic fields. No, I mean other fields actually. Like the central idea we needed to understand from Foucault is this: power is not simply something that government or ruler possess and use to control people from above. No, power is present in all social relation everywhere at all levels. It operates through language, like through institution, and through everyday practices, through what we consider normal or acceptable. So power is diffused. It spreads uh, through the whole fabric of society. So just a second, okay. So that let me move this to that slide so that it becomes even more clearer to you. Yes. Hmm. All right. So Michel Foucault also, introduces us the important concept of discourse. Okay, and a discourse is not just a way of thinking or writing. Okay, so it is a whole system of knowledge, beliefs, and practices. That defines what can be said, what can be known, or what can be done, and what can be done or that is within a particular field or society. So medical discourse, legal discourse, educational discourse, each of these defines what is normal and what is not normal, that is abnormal, who is an expert and who is not. So you may consider this like for example textbooks in symbols, textbook and symbols, like sorry, not symbols, sorry, textbook in schools, like do not simply transmit neutral information. They reflect the values, priorities, and the perspectives of those who have the power to design the curriculum. What is included and what is excluded, like whose voice are heard. All of this is shaped by power. So for literary criticism, this means we should ask what power structures does the text reinforce or challenge? Whose perspective is given, authority? Whose voices are, silenced? This is the, Foucauldian, critical, lens. All right. Now next, let's move on to feminist, you know, poetics. Do you remember who is it? I already mentioned in the. Let me write it here so that we are not confused about it. Enemy what? Snowalder, right? Snowalder, not snow. Sorry, Snowalder. Let me also edit here. So this topic, feminist politics, is the branch of literary criticism. So we shall be focusing on feminist politics based on Eleni Showalter. Okay. So now what is this? Uh, Feminist politics is uh, it is a branch also branch of literary criticism that focuses on how women are represented in literature, how gender shapes both the writing and the reading of text, how the literary traditions have uh, uh, historically been dominated by male perspectives. So let's begin. So when you look at the history of Western literature, you will notice that the majority of celebrated authors have been men. Women writers were often excluded from the literary canon, dismissed or ignored. Like even in text written by men, women are frequently portrayed in limited and stereotypical ways as passive, emotional, dependent, or existing primarily in relation to male characters. So think about how many great novels you have read where the female characters are defined entirely by their relationship to men, as like wives, mothers, lovers, or daughters, rather than as fully rounded human beings with their own desires, ambitions, and inner lives. So feminist, criticisms, questions us or asks us to notice these patterns and to question them. Right? Uh, it asks, why has the literary tradition has been so dominated by male, voices? Why are female characters so often shown as passive or secondary? What does this tell us about the society that produced these texts? And what happens when women do write? And how does their experience, perspective, change the kind of stories that get told? So, Eleni, so Walter's feminist politics, also examines uh, the ways in which genders has operates and literary wisdom itself. So not just in the text. For a long time, literary, critics applied standards and values that were implicitly masculine, and women's writing was judged against these standards, and often, lacking. I mean, it is found lacking, something like that. So, feminist criticism challenges this and insists on a more inclusive and equitable approach to literature. So the goal of feminist criticism, is not simply to criticize; it is to recover, to restore, so to give voice to representatives that have been marginalized or overlooked. So this is all about Eleni Showalter feminist politics. Now we shall move on to Eleni Showalter's Venus criticism. So, so this is a term coined by Eleni, Showalter itself, right? So the word came from uh, comes from the Greek word like kind or geek or something like that, meaning women. So gynocrism is a specific and important approach within feminist literary criticism, and understanding it will even will deepen your ability to analyze literature through a feminist lens. Okay, so Now, what exactly is gynocriticism, and how it is different from the feminist poetics we just discussed in the previous slide? Previous slide. Now, while earlier feminist criticism was often reactive, that is, it focuses on exposing and challenging how women were misrepresented in literature, were written by men. So, gynocriticism takes a different and more constructive direction. Instead of looking at how women are portrayed in literature and like written by men, criticism focuses on specifically on women as writers. So it asks, what happens when we take women's own writing seriously and study it on its own terms? So, so Walter argued that women writers have their own literary tradition, their own literary history, their own theme, styles, and ways of seeing the world. For too long, this tradition was invisible or undervalued because it was judged against masculine standard. So gynocratism possesses that we need to build a framework, one that is specifically designed to understand, appreciate, and evaluate women's literature from within. So this means studying the female literary tradition as a rich and complex history, like like it means like exploring the particular experiences that women writers have drawn upon, like experiences of domesticity, the body, the relationship, marginalizations, and the creativity under like constraints. So it means looking at the specific language, imagery, and narrative structures that tend to appear in women's writing. So Virginia Woolf is one of the like the most frequently cited example in uh, gynocriticism. So here, her novels also, and essays, the novels and essays draws on experience as a women in a particular, not particular, in a patriarchal society, and her reflection on the challenges women face as writers, and an exploration of the inner life and the consciousness of female characters. So gynocriticism provides us the tools to appreciate the full depth and the significance of such writing. So even in your like if you're planning to write or something like that, even in your own academic work, you can apply gynocriticism by focusing on like women writer authors, identify recurring themes in their writings, and situating their work within a broader female, literary traditions. So this is all about unit 20. With this we have completed 5 minutes of block 4, literary criticism and theory, right? And this is also the completion of overall ENM 6213. All right. So now let's move on to the questions. This question is for checking your progress, how far you have understood this topic, right? So the first question is the difference between signifier and signified. The second is the categories of signs with suitable examples, and third deals with the power influence. How does power influence culture and literature? So please try to go through this question as well and also this PPT and then solve these questions. And now we are moving towards the conclusions of this lecture. First, so today we have discussed how postmodern criticism shift, from fixed meaning to, how and not like that, how post criticism, shift focus from fixed meaning to multiple interpretations, and how we have also learned. I have also discussed that how it highlights language, power, and gender as key elements in understanding literature. And have also learned that this series encourages critical thinking and deeper analysis of text. So with this, we conclude today's lecture. If you have any questions, doubts, you may either send me over email or WhatsApp. If you don't want to see it here. All right. And uh, if you have any doubts, further clarifications, and about the exam assignment, we can have one more session for that. Okay, if you wish to. So if you do not now, if you do not have any questions or doubts, with this we conclude today's lecture, today's session, and thank you so much. And I will see you in the next session.